Hello, and welcome to the Dialogue Project podcasts. This is a one-off. I gave a talk last night at something called the Stone Club, run by the extraordinary Carol Stone. And it was a talk on listening and empathy. And I was asked by somebody today to record it and put it out as a podcast. So I've done exactly that. So here you go. It's about 12 minutes long, I think, something like that. This is it. So it's called Something a Little Like Empathy.
What you're about to listen to is an edit created by the Dialogue Project, with the full permission of everyone involved in the conversation. If you can hear my voice clearly, the volume will be about right for you. Thank you for listening.
Understanding difference. Essentially, that's what I do for a living. I help people talk to each other, people who are different to each other. My professional interest in understanding difference, and therefore empathy, took the form of starting something called the Dialogue Project, in response to the events of September the 11th, 2001, when against the bright blue September sky, we saw two worlds of difference collide in a way that, let's hope, changed forever our perspective on why there's a need to understand people who, in one way or another, aren't like us. Actually, if I'm honest, it wasn't 9/11 that prompted me to give up what I was doing and focus instead on helping people talk to each other. It was rather Bill Clinton's speech in the November of that year, when he essentially said something like, if we want strawberries all year round, if we're choosing this global society, then we have to understand that our neighbourhood just got bigger. I think what he meant, in essence, was that the difference that had, until recently, kept a safe distance is now among us in a way that it just wasn't 25 years ago. And he went on to say that in this world of difference, we'll fall into one of two groups. There'll be those of us who look at difference and see richness and learning and possibility. And this group of people will move towards difference, will respect it and inspect it, explore it, and who knows, even embrace it. And then there'll be those of us who see difference as division. We'll see difference and perceive danger. We'll see difference and feel an inherent threat to what's known and familiar. At best, we may simply wish it away. At worst, we may seek to destroy it. Now, of course, difference has always existed between peoples and people, countries and cultures. Come to that, tolerance and terror aren't exactly new ideas either. And so empathy, which starts with understanding difference, has always been necessary, but never so much as today, because things have changed. Our world has changed. Our world is changing. And in terms of difference, for me, the most significant changes are these. They're very simple ones. Aeroplanes and the internet. Flights are cheap and the internet's virtually free. And so our world, both physical and virtual, has shrunk. The boundaries and borders that used to make us feel safe are disappearing. So difference, global difference, if it's not sitting next to us in the classroom or on the bus or on the tube train, is staring us in the Facebook. But for many of us, for most of us perhaps, it's not the global difference that preoccupies us, it's the difference we deal with on a day-to-day basis, the local difference, the difference that permeates and pervades our everyday lives, that occupies us, for good or ill. Ask any husband which relationship he's most concerned about, and it probably won't be the one between Barack Obama and Benjamin Netanyahu. It'll be his relationship with his own wife, or his son, or his boss. Ask the child who's frightened of going to school which she fears most, a nuclear Iran, or her ex-best friend, who's now threatening to post pictures of her on the internet. Terror, in its different forms, is everywhere. Possibility, in its different forms, is everywhere, because difference is everywhere. So difference is everywhere, and if we're people who are interested in understanding it, if our desire is to create empathy, then there's a demand for dialogue. But the demand is not just for the concept of dialogue. And for me, dialogue is action. Conversation is the art of the practical. And like any craft or art, there are tools of the trade. And in my experience, when it comes to empathy, there's one tool in particular that's the sharpest, most practical tool of all. It's called listening. Listening is the subtle knife that carves through matter to what matters. It reveals new worlds and possibilities. Listening can create the as yet unimagined ideas and the unconsidered solutions. And listening is a skill that we can all use. But in a world that's increasingly obsessed and seduced by the visual, I think we need to redefine and rediscover listening. So, just for a few minutes, I want you to consider listening as a form of expression. As much as the way we look in our carefully groomed clothes, as much as the way we sound, as much as the way we smell of perfume and carefully chosen aftershave, the way in which we listen can tell others a great deal about us, about who we are and how we are. So, let's reclaim the art of listening from the exclusive grip of the caring professions, some of whom seem to have become a little careless with it. But let's be careful ourselves. Listening's not a soft skill or an act of cuddly kindness. Listening's a sharp blade, and it cuts deep. So if deep listening, if rich listening is the key to empathy, how can we do it better? Allow me to share what I like to think of as the 4 lenses of listening, and I'll offer you a glimpse of what I've learnt in my work and touch just lightly on some of the experiences I've had with people who've appreciated and responded to being given a damn good listening to. The first type of listening we learn is listening to. This is where listening starts. As a child, we're told to listen to daddy, listen to your mother, listen to me, listen to the birds, listen to the music, listen to the sound of me saying ah, ee, ooh, listen to me. This is the first stage of listening. And as adults, if we want to continue to learn how to listen to better, my suggestion would be simply just to listen for longer, with a little more patience, with a little more time, with a little less distraction. Secondly, there's listening for. As we grow up, as we mature, we develop the capacity to listen for things, to listen beyond merely what's said, but for how it's spoken. Mum's talking about her trip to see Grandma, but she sounds upset. My girlfriend's saying she wants to see me next week, but I can tell something's wrong. As we get older, we listen more consciously, with more awareness. And so, when I'm with a group of truanting kids in Walworth, racist, angry, hurt, fiercely defensive 13-year-olds, young people who can't remember what it's like to be listened to, young people who've realised, maybe only subconsciously, that the only way to get noticed is to do and say outrageous things. If I want to empathise with these young people, it's not enough just to listen to them. I have to listen for. I have to listen for clues. I learn to listen for the small things, the things that don't belong, the held breath, a disguised telltale sign that this young woman does care about her future, the slight catch in the boy's voice as he discloses that he wants to come to school. Now, if we can, and we can, listen for clues that these young men and women are compassionate, considerable, considering teenagers who haven't yet given up on themselves, even if everyone else has. If we can listen for symptoms of success, perhaps we can begin to notice what's been hidden, what's buried, but ultimately what's there, aching to be heard. Next, there's listening from. I learnt to do this in a project called Your Thoughts and Mine, where I worked with Muslim groups around the UK and discovered that in order simply to understand someone whose faith's not just a set of religious rules or guidelines, but in fact a heartfelt way of life, I had to acknowledge that I was sitting in a completely different place to him. And by finding the humility to accept that my school of life was less whole, less integrated, less rigorous, and by accepting, in fact by seeking out, the distinctive differences between my perspective and his, far from limiting my capacity to listen, I was actually freeing myself to become a deeper, more honest partner in conversation. I became free of political correctness, of caution and constraint. I was listening from my experience and not trying to second guess his. We created air between us, he and I, and together we began to breathe. So it became a livelier, more robust, healthy conversation. We minded the gap. We felt the difference. We enjoyed the difference. We laughed more. We learnt more from different places. And then finally, and perhaps here we begin to approach empathy, there's listening with. Have I ever done this? Have I ever actually stood in someone else's shoes? Have I ever truly occupied their world? No. How can I? How can we? How can I imagine accurately what it's like to be Jess, who suffers from Tourette's syndrome and swears 10 times every minute, scaring children in the street and shouting out her own PIN number at the hole in the wall? How can I share the experience of Jean-Francois Clairvoy, the astronaut, who's rocketed thousands of miles up into space to fix the Hubble telescope, and who's turned around to look at our planet from outer space and wept like a boy at its beauty? Can I say to the woman I love who's failed her driving test for the 3rd time in a row, I know how frustrated you feel. I know exactly how you feel. No, because I don't. So whoever they are, these people who aren't like us, can we be them? No. But can we be with them? Can we sit with them? Can we see with them as they look through their window on the world? Can we lean towards them? Can we put our arm around them as they gaze and wonder with them? Can we try at least to forget ourselves, if only for a while, and listen with them? Yes, we can try. And if we try, if we can learn to listen like this, and we can learn to listen like this, perhaps then we can begin to experience something a little like empathy. And then maybe we can begin to understand more about the extraordinary, different individuals that we all are. Thank you for listening.